Gas fitter exam cram session, video 9. Okay, yes, so 7/8 of an inch amount of threads, 1.25 inches. We'll have exactly 1 inch worth of threads, 1 inch length of threads. That's a good spot for us. Like I said, we always want to find a point of reference. The 1 inch because, well, we really went overboard on this one. It's a lot of stuff. Is it really that complicated? And when you get to the code, yeah. When you get to this exam, yeah. But with the 1 inch burned into our mind, now we can say, well, okay, we know 1 inch is the weird guy out of the whole table. 1.25 inches, the one that comes right after it, we'll find some solace that it's actually 1 inch worth of threads. Okay. So, question 34. To reiterate, the number of threads to be cut on a 1 inch gas pipe is 10. You're going to get 10 threads because at 7/8 length and 11.5 per inch pitch, you're only going to be able to fit 10 threads on there. So 1 inch is 10 threads, 7/8 of an inch long at the end of the pipe. Okay, the next question. Once again, I grouped all these questions together. You can take advantage of it to make your flashcards if you haven't already made your flashcard for the important tables. You need to know this by heart. You should have no issues remembering this stuff. Okay. Question 35. The number of threads to be cut on a 2 inch gas pipe, not the length. The number of threads to be cut on a 2 inch gas pipe is 11. Okay, why is that so? Let's look at the table. Let's see if it correlates. Well, in the table, we established that starting at 1.25 pipe size, we're going to have a full 1 inch of threads. And guess what? To make our lives easier, we don't have to memorize every single size. We can see like, oh, here's a pattern at 1.5 inches. Hey, it's also 1. Is it possible that maybe even 2 inch can do it? Well, no, let's see. 2 inch, 1 inch threaded portion, 1 inch length of threaded portion. So for your flashcard, you might not even have to make 3 separate flashcards. Make one flashcard that says length of threaded portion for 1.25 to 2 inch pipe. And of course, there's only one size in the middle, so we know that means 1.5 inch, 1 inch. And because we know this, we're very familiar that our drop head or the speed chuck on the 300, when we set it to cut from the 1 to 2 inch range, rigid already makes it that it's going to be pretty much the same as you're going back and forth, except for the 1 inch, of course. It's 11.5 threads per inch. So the table says approximate 11 threads. So we're going to get 11 threads. 1 inch worth, worth of threading on it for 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch, 2 inch, 1.25 to 2 inch. So we memorize that. Now, because we made a point of cutting ourselves off at the 2 inch, we know that if we go to 2.5, 3 inch, 4 inch, that's where we got to work a little bit more because the numbers are going to be slightly different. Okay, but for now. Baby steps, right? Number 35, the number of threads to be cut on a 2 inch gas pipe is 11. Okay. For ease of studying, I also made it that you don't have to kill yourself trying to guess on the very first time. It's like you're going to start noticing a pattern. It's like, gee, I wonder what the answer would be to the next question. Yes, I did it on purpose. 10, 11, 12, 13. The next question is going to ask you about 3 inch pipe. The number of threads, 12. I did that on purpose. I'm trying to help. I figure as you're doing the test, it's not going to be this easy. It's not going to be such a give me on the exam. But here, these questions here, if you know the answer to these questions, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to rattle off the table perfectly, but now you know where the cutoffs are. You know that at 1 inch, we have 10 threads. 1 inch, That's the guide that's got to be different. At 2 inch, we got 11 threads. Where does it make the change? It makes the change at 3 inch. At 3 inch, we got 12 threads. Okay? And if we look at the table, at 3 inch, we're going to have 12 threads. Now, since we're at the table, and I can't make a question for everything, but since we're here, let's also establish that not only 3 inch, 2.5 inch. 2.5 inch will also have an 1.5 inch length of threaded portion, giving us 12 threads. So 2.5 inch, 3 inch gives us 1.5 inch length of threaded portion with 12 threads. Okay, so we know that 2 inch is where we stop having 11 threads. We know at 3 inch is where we stop having 12 threads. Between 2 and 3 inch is 2.5. That's going to have 12 threads. Can't have 11. 2 inch is the cutoff. It'll have 12. What's the cutoff after 3 inch? Well, like I said, even though 3.5 and 4 inch are commercially available, you notice that the code shies away from talking about it too much. It will pop up here and there, not on this table. So, the number of threads to be cut on a 4 inch gas pipe. Well, we said that 3 inch was going to be the cutoff for 12, and I did kind of make the answers easy enough to figure. It's like, yes, it's going to be 13. Okay, so it's going to be 13 threads. But what is the length of threaded portion? Well, we said that 3 inch and 2.5 inch share that number. So obviously the number is not going to be 1.5 inches. It's going to be something a little bigger. It's going to be 1 inch and 5/8. So 1.5 inches is 1 inch and 4/8. 4/8 is 1/2 inch. So 1/8 more, right? So now is a good time to, since we have this under our belt, let's see, number of threads. You know what, let's keep going with the questions because the questions are going to do this for us. Question 38. The length of the threaded portion on a 3/4 inch gas pipe is, and it's following the secret little tempo that I told you about. So yes, if you want to pick 3/4 inch, that is exactly the length of the threaded portion on a 3/4 inch gas pipe. If you're looking at the table as we go along, you'll see, yes, 3/4 gives you 3/4 length. Okay, and because we're always looking for relationships, rhythms, we're always looking to consolidate our memory. We don't want to remember, every single line, when all we have to do is remember, like, the greater, the lesser values, the higher, the lower limits. Everything else in between falls in there. No problem. Okay, and it's important for this table because this table has probably the most amount of information. Okay, so the length of the threaded portion on a 3/4 inch gas pipe is 3/4 inches. How many threads are we going to get? 10 threads. Okay, here's where, once again, the 1 inch, it shares, it's in its own little limbo, because when we're threading with rigid equipment, we know that it's always a separate set of stuff for 1 through 2 inch. And if we got to do small piping, 1/2 inch and 3/4, it's a different set of stuff. Okay, especially on the 300 with the speed chucks, it's like you got to pull that one chuck out and put the other one in, just for 1/2 inch and 3/4. So with 3/4 and 1/2 inch, we get a 3/4 worth of threads, and we're going to get 10 threads on the end of either one of those. And on the 1 inch, 10 threads on the either one of those. That's another area that could throw you off, because you figure, well, no, 3/4 and 1/2 inch, that's 14 threads per inch? So how is that possible? Well, even though we're using dies that cut at 14 TPI, 14 threads per inch, we're only cutting 3/4 inch worth of threads. Math works out. And for 1 inch, when we're using dies that cut at 11.5 threads per inch, way different than 14, but we're only cutting 7/8 worth of threads. It ends up that they meet in the same place at 10 threads by the time you're done with that piece of pipe. If you take that piece of pipe and count the threads, you're going to get about 10. So this all works. And once you start realizing to be aware that, you can be talking about threads per inch, which I highly doubt they're going to be talking about in this exam. You don't get asked questions on thread per inch. Okay? You will get asked the length of threads that you should end up with and how many threads you should have at the end of it. Those numbers can vary. Okay. Let's see. The length of the threaded portion on a 1-inch gas pipe we established is going to be the oddball, the odd guy out, 7/8 of an inch. The length of threaded portion on a 2-inch gas pipe is 1 inch. Okay. If question 39 established the highest limit for 7/8, the next question I kind of intimated, gave kind of like in a way give you a subliminal suggestion that, well, then 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch, 2 inch is going to be 1 inch length of threads. The length of threaded portion on a 3-inch gas pipe, and that's also going to include the 2.5, is going to be 1.5 inch. And finally, the last entry in the table is going to be 4 inch. We know that's not going to be 1.5 inch, so what's it going to be? Well, it's going to be a little larger. What's a little larger than 1.5 inch? The only choice we're left with is 1 5/8. Kind of makes sense. Now, 4 inch and 1 inch are going to share that same anomaly in that, well, if 1 inch had 7/8 length of thread, 6/8 is 3/4. Well, 3/4 has 3/4 length. 7/8 is 1/8 more, and then after that, a full 1 inch. Well, 1 5/8 is 1/8 more. After the 3 inch, which is an 1.5 inch, as 1.5 inch. So you see the general rhythm in the table. You see where there are the differences. Like let's say, for example, with the 1 inch and the 4 inch, it's an 1/8 difference. This sounds like a lot. Don't worry. I'm going to draw it out because now we go back to the very beginning when we were dealing with, I think a little too early, but good thing we did it anyway, the purging lengths. Okay, and that is not an easy table. It's not an easy, it's not an easy thing to get into your head first time around as the first thing you're going to hit, but we did it. And we became familiar with the idea of how we're going to look at tables, how we're going to take them apart, streamline them, and make it the least amount to memorize and also easy to build. Because with this table, I'm going to show you something. Okay, you're thinking, okay, he said I got to memorize this table by heart, backwards and forwards, that I can be asked any single entry. That's a lot of entries. That's a lot of details to keep track of. And this table is on a page with 2 other tables, and then the page coming before has another table. I mean, this is a lot. It sure is. But there's more tricks. So, with just this, ignoring all the numbers in the drawing, just the concept of that now, once again, for that same set of threads that you would cut on a piece of 1-inch pipe, that is not going to change. Okay? We're not defying the laws of physics here. Look at all the different questions you can have based on just how you're going to ask it. That's the hard part of this test. That's the part that knowledgeable guys, smart guys, guys who did study, mess up and come back saying it's a very difficult test. The wording threw them off and everything. The way they're saying this, and like, yeah, even if you studied, if you didn't study with the right approach in mind, if you didn't study with enough information on not just what you need to study, go ahead and ask the Department of Buildings. They're not going to lie to you. They're going to tell you the exact truth because I totally agree with them. They're going to say, well, what do I need to study for the exam? And they say, fuel gas code. And it's like, guess what? That is exactly the truth. You need to study the fuel gas code. But that's not enough, okay? The fuel gas code, but how are you going to study it? How are you going to look at it? How is the test maker going to ask you to regurgitate the fuel gas code? So many different things, okay? So, now that you realize, or beginning to realize more and more of what you're up against, I did tell you this is what it was going to be, and it's definitely proving out to be that way. Let's build upon some of the concepts for memorizing a table of a lot of numbers and figures that, well, it's very dry, and we might as well start memorizing every single baseball player's earned run average for the last 50 years or so. Yeah, that's one giant table of a lot of numbers. Not exactly the easiest thing to memorize. So, okay, we have iron pipe sizes. We have the table here, all right? First of all, we're going to establish the domain, the area, the territory we're covering. So we're going to deal with 1/2 inch, okay, 3/4, 1 inch, and then of course 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, 2 inch, because this is kind of how we think about it. When we're threading, let's face it, it's a different thing. It's usually a different set of equipment, different set of wrenches. If we know we're working on 1/2 inch or 3/4, as opposed to working on 1 inch through 2 inch. And then, what if we get to bigger stuff? Well, we got 2.5, and they're only worried about 3 inch and 4 inch. Good. So that's what we're working with. We're going to be working all the way from 1/2 inch to 4 inch. Since we're here, well, why these numbers are so important? Well, we know at 4 inch, that's the largest threaded fitting we're going to be able to work with anyway. So it makes logical sense that the table would end at 4, correct? The largest threaded fitting we can have, 4 inch. Where can we have it? We can have it in a system that is half PSI max. What's the smallest outlet to a range, to a stove? 3/4. Is that the smallest outlet we can have? No. We can have a 1/2 inch outlet. There's some appliances that are going to take a 1/2 inch inlet, you know. But I just figured I'd throw it out that yes, that is another question. The smallest outlet for a range is going to be at least 3/4 of an inch. So with 1/2 and 3/4, the length of the threaded portion is going to be 3/4 of an inch. Okay, very good. 3/4 of an inch length. Okay, and the number of threads is going to be 10. So that's good. 10. Now for 1 inch, we knew 1 inch was the weird guy. So as nice as it would be to remember, well, 1 inch is going to be 1 inch, it's not. But then that helps us remember, because we remember, well, it's not going to be what we want it to be. It's going to be 7/8. Okay? And 1 inch is the only one that's going to be 7/8. To make up for that, well, guess what? We can group it in with the 10. So, the nice part about that is, although 1 inch doesn't match the 3/4 here, it's so strange, it's got its own 7/8, but 10 threads on the end of it. Okay, we already proved that none of that information is contradictory. So, if 1 inch doesn't have 1 inch worth of threads, then it's the next one that's going to have it. So we know the 1 inch worth of threads is going to start with the 1.25 inch, and it's going to hold true for the rest of this. So, 1 inch worth of threads for this set. All right, and luckily for us, well, what's the next number after 10? 11. it's also going to have 11. So this block of information, you can sum it up with 1 and 11. 1 inch and 11. And it's all ones. So, allowing ourselves to just absorb the numbers and just let the numbers become something instinctive in us, an automatic reaction. 1 1/4 inch, 1 1/2 inch, 2 inch, 1 inch worth of threads, 1 inch length of threads, 11 threads at the end of the pipe. We're not even going to deal with threads per inch. How many threads per inch should you have? It doesn't come up in the exam. We know what it is. It was burned into us in our apprenticeship, in our early years. You know, we see it a lot of times when we look, you know, maybe we're checking out the dies or, you know, purchasing threading equipment. So, but that doesn't really come up. What comes up is length of threads and how many threads by the time you're done. So, now it looks a little easier. We cleaned it up a little bit, organized it a little bit. You could actually have just one flashcard or divide it in two. For 1 1/4 inch through 2, what is the length? 1 inch. Same thing, 1 1/4 inch, 2, how many threads? 11. It could be 2 separate cards. It's up to you how you like to do it. Some people like one item of information. Some people prefer to put a little more. However feels comfortable for you. So, if we know that from 1 1/4 inch to 2, that's where we drew that line, and these are the numbers, we must have done it because at 2 1/2, the numbers are going to be different. And it's a bigger pipe, so the numbers are going to be bigger. It makes a logical progression. It just seems to make sense. And at 2 1/2, we have 1 1/2 inch worth of threads. Okay? An inch, if we measure the length of the threaded portion, it's going to be 1 1/2 inch. And those threads, the number is going to be 12. Okay? And if we look at the table, we're going to see that luckily for us, guess what? We can consolidate more information in that, guess what? For the 3 inch also. So 2 1/2 and 3 inch. 1 1/2 inch length, 12 threads. And it makes sense with the table. Okay, and another thing, although it has no direct correlation, you know, you can just have it in your mind, like the silly extraneous thoughts in your head or a song that you can't get out of your head, even though you can, you know, you're concentrating and do whatever it is you're doing. Your mind can still have a tune playing in your head that won't go away, or other thoughts or whatever. Let this be another thought as you're looking at this information. Half. There's no reason to say they have any affinity to each other. It's just that it happens to be half and half. Where I saw a half, I also have another half. 2 1/2 inch. So at 2 1/2, the 1 1/2 inch length starts. It's got to be 12 threads because here, probably the sizes we're most familiar with, we've threaded the most in our careers. It's 1 and 11, 2 1/2 and 3 is 1 1/2 inch and 12. And that just leaves the 4. So the 4 obviously is going to be different. The 4 obviously is going to have the biggest numbers. Well, let's not even look at the table. Let's pretend we didn't see the table. If we look at this and see what happens when we get something that now interrupts our pattern, doesn't make it as smooth, because let's face it, 7/8, that's how a refrigerator guy talks, okay? And once again, this is not on the test, but it's the same exact fitting. But if you're a plumber, you ask for 3/4. If you're an HVAC guy, you ask for 7/8 OD. Okay? It's still the same thing, but 3/4 plus 1/8 is 7/8. 3/4 plus 1/8 is 7/8. If the next jump to make a natural progression was to put 1/8 of an inch, is it possible? Is it a good guess? I think it's a good guess, and in this case, it's the right guess. 1 1/2 inch, the next size, the next progression is going to be 1 inch and 5/8. 1/2 inch is 4/8. 4/8 plus 1/8, 5/8. So It's going to be 1 5/8 length of threads. And how many threads? Let's not even make it complicated. Let's look at the pattern. Well, 10 is 10. The next one it was one more. The next one was one more. If we say 13, just based on that, we would be correct. 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay? So, we start off with listing what pipe size we had to worry about. In this case, this is something we know without having to think about it. I mean, if you ask someone who never dealt with pipe to memorize the size of pipes from 1/2 to 4, that would take a little while. You? No. It's like you automatically know what size. It's like 1/2. What's the next one up? 3/4, 1 inch, 1 1/4, 1.5 inch, 2, 2.5. You know that, when you know 2.5 is the one. You don't see it as much, but you definitely see it enough that it's there. 3.5, 4.5, very rare, so we don't include them. 3 inch, 4 inch. And then from 1/2 to 4, from 1/2 inch and 3/4, we know we start off with 3/4. We know 1 inch upsets everything. Here is where we feel most comfortable, and 1, 11, all ones. Next set, the higher sizes. We see 2.5, well, 1.5 inch, 12, 4, 1 5/8, 13, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, that's a lot. That's probably the most information that you would have to memorize for a particular table. You must memorize this. You must know this. Okay, there is no guarantee what size they're going to ask you, but they will ask, and you got to know it, and you got to know the difference what they're asking for. So, if that makes you uncomfortable or nervous, well, 2 things. You're starting off now. You give yourself enough time. It's like you'll memorize this. But you would be right in saying like, well, okay, I can memorize this, but you know what? I go into tests and it's like I blank out. Guess what? So does everyone. Your mind, like any other human being's mind, is different under stressful situations than any other situation. Right now here in the classroom, sure, you can memorize this, you can recite it back, accurately, and when you leave, if you go over it enough, you can recite it accurately, maybe even better, with more confidence in a week, 2 weeks, etc. And all of this means nothing because you could go into the exam room and completely draw a blank and not remember it at all. Well, then it makes everything seem pointless, right? Just like life. I mean, look, you want me to tell you there's meaning to life? I'm going to tell you no. Well, then if there's no meaning to life, why don't we kill ourselves? Well, you got a point there too, but you know what? Just because there's no meaning in life, that doesn't mean, well, you can't just go on, deluding yourself into there is one, and, we'll save the offing ourselves for another day. Same thing with this, okay? Saying that you're going to blank out and forget everything in the examining room, sure, that is very likely, okay? Your mind, and let's take it to a more extreme example. Let's take it to a state trooper on a routine stop, okay? You see him in the rearview mirror, woo, 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 woo. You pull over, he pulls over. Routine, correct? Okay. This state trooper got a firearm. I'm pretty sure he's got a shotgun in the trunk, I'm pretty sure he's not going to assume that you're the friendliest person in the world, and I'm going to figure that, his job requires him to practice a minimum with that firearm to attain some kind of accuracy and skill with it, okay? Right? He's not a soccer mom. It's not like, it's not like someone who's never touched a firearm is doing this. I mean, I would say let's give this state trooper the benefit of the doubt that he is a seasoned professional. He knows how to handle that.